One of the experiences that you told us you observed on the tour was you actually met a vampire of New Orleans, and her donor. Would you
Blood
be able
donor.
to blood donor? Yes. Could you get into that story and how all that happened and what that was like being in the presence of a New Orleans vampire?
It was insane. You think you'll always be ready and you're open until it happens and you're like, oh. Yeah, so I was just walking down the street with my friend Jen, and we're just peeking into a window at this hotel, just like, oh, that looks like a nice hotel. And this woman walks up to us with her man following behind her, and she's like, hi, are you looking for the Ursuline convent? Totally unprompted. Like, we had there was no eye contact, nothing. And I was like, no, we're just out here strolling around. And the way she was dressed very gothic, and her fangs were like this big on each side of her mouth. And I thought she was a vampire tour guide because that's how a lot of them dress here. So she just looked
How
the part.
how old was she about? Older, younger?
Probably late 20s, 30s, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Probably
She appeared 20 or
here.
30. So
We don't
she
really know if she was born in the
yeah.
1700s or not. I did not ask
Yeah,
to see her papers.
there you go.
I didn't even know how to really speak to her. And her man that was with her didn't have any fangs, but was dressed the same way. So
Mm.
we start talking to her. Well, I couldn't really say anything. My friend Jen was taking over for me, and she tells us she's a vampire and that this is her blood donor, and that she is from New Orleans but now lives in Indiana. So gentrifying much, and brought brought her blood donor
Yeah.
to New Orleans so she could show him the vampire culture in New Orleans,
Mm.
and was very
Mm.
clear of like, this is my blood donor.
So
Casual.
she yeah, so she was on almost like a parent would bring their child back to their hometown to say this is
This
where
is
I
where
grew
I
up, and
grew up.
this was the vampire bringing her donor back to the New Orleans kind of culture vibe to say
Yeah.
this is where it all started.
Yeah, this is where I got my first pint of blood.
Yes.
O positive. What up?
Yep.
And yeah, and so then she was like, "Yeah, I'm taking him to an event." And so then I got curious because now I'm like, "Ooh, what's this other cool vampire place I don't know about?" And she said they were on their way to a riverboat cruise. So
Mm.
very wholesome.
Very, very classy. I can't, I can't imagine what I would be thinking in that moment. That's kind of one of the situations where I would think that this is ridiculous. How does this woman live like this? But then also it's interesting and engaging if someone walked up to me on the street and was talking about their vampirism. It would be so ridiculous, but so like this opportunity may never happen again to walk around and talk to someone who believes that they're a vampire, and I want to just see how this person's mind works from that standpoint.
And
Like,
I
how did they
mean,
get into
she's
that?
not hurting anybody. Anyone who's a
Yeah.
donor volunteers and they all get tested before they drink from them.
Hmm.
So they're not hurting anyone. And if that's what they believe and they feel,
Hmm.
and they're not hurting anybody, then okay. And but yeah, I'm very rarely ever speechless. I'm a talker. And I was like,
Yeah.
I did not know. And thank God my friend Jen was keeping the conversation going, because I was like, wow, I have been in so many situations where I have to pivot and have to go off script. And this moment I felt myself.